What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? We are live. We got episode number 113 of the Club and Sub podcast. This week we're talking UFC Vegas 64, headlined by Amanda Lemos, Marina Rodriguez. Not the best card in the world, for being honest here. But we do bet on fights, so we have bets here. We will break it down. We'll try to make this more entertaining than this card is likely to be. If you don't use Bet Online for a 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 deposit, use the promo code Club Sub. Please drop a like and subscribe. It would help our channel out quite a bit. And as usual, we got the whole crew tonight. We got me, John at MMA Fox, Luke at SWR_betting, and Lags at Danny_Lags. I mean, any high level thoughts here, Lags, on the card? Anything you really to think about here?
I guess I should say I'm glad that the main event was actually, kept in together. I know there were some flight issues on the Lemos side, but glad that's pulling together because at least, the card's not great, but the main event, again, I think it's a banger.
Luke, how about yourself?
Yeah, I don't really give a shit about this card. Just obviously I have to address the sunglasses thing. I'm sick as shit. Might have pink eye or some kind of eye infection. So, I'm looking like homeboy Stevie Wonder here this week. But yeah, I mean, like you said, John, bets to be had, bets to be made. We'll break it down.
Hey, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No one's asking too much there. I mean, this card's brutal. I mean, the most interesting storyline this week was whether or not the riots going on in Brazil were going to shut down 3 fights on this card. Would have made for a more enjoyable watch, just watching 9 straight fights with good pacing, but. Nonetheless, we will hop into it. First fight of the night, Ramona Pasquale, Tamiris Vidal. This is the only fight I haven't looked at, to be honest. I've been putting it off because the line's coming in, and I'd really like to avoid a play here. Luke, what do you think?
It's one of those unfortunate spots where I was forced to make a play based on the number. I played Pasquale at like plus 135. I think she's like market wide plus 120-ish or so now. Honestly, I think the line's going to flip. I think the money's going to continue to come in. Obviously, sloppy, low-level fight, but I think there are some just quantifiable things that you can actually look at for, Pasquale that justifies her probably actually being a favorite in this fight, where this other chicken Vidal, like I was going in, complete open mind, not a huge fan of Pasquale. And I go back and I just watch her tape. I'm like, this girl does nothing well. like nothing really. She has no volume. She barely ever kicks. She has an overhand right, which doesn't really even land most of the time anyway. That's it. And then she's pretty reliant on just having to, muscle girls down, but her takedowns are shit. They're not technical. The Eileen Perez fight, she was getting dominated in. I mean, she was legitimately losing every single second of that fight. But Eileen Perez, fouled her 3 times, illegal knee, cooter kick, cunt punt, whatever you want to call it. And homegirl takes her ball and goes home, right? And even in her last fight against, I can't recall the girl's name, she was fighting like kind of a base boxer girl where she was cleanly losing. She was able to get on top of her, land the takedown. She was in mount, and she actually then drops for a heel hook, and she gets it. But if it goes to show you what the level of the IQ of this girl is, she sacrificed mount for a heel hook. like that just tells you all you need to. And I think with Pasquale, and the thing, honestly, why I'm playing her here is I don't think any of her 2 losses within the UFC are just translatable at all to Vidal, right? She fought, Brazilian Joseph Benavidez, who's a woman, who came forward and just completely slung hands and slung bombs. This chick's not going to do that. She fights Edwards, who just kind of stood on the outside and teeped her for 15 minutes. This girl doesn't really throw kicks, who's not even on the level of Jocelyn Edwards, which I think says a lot too. So it's like, I came away saying, it's like, I don't know how you price this girl as a favorite against anybody in the UFC. Like, I understand it's Ramona Pasquale. I understand it's a low-level fight. But plus 135 when this girl, I think, should be favored, like, I have to play it. I had to do it.
Yeah, fair. Lags, any thoughts from you here?
No, I think it's just pretty low level, quite frankly. Listen, I get it from a dog perspective. She has upside of grappling, but I don't think she's that great, to be quite honest. So yeah, pass for me.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't looked at it. Honestly, the pod
Yeah.
kind of snuck up on me this week. I've been trying to sneak in fights for next week because there's a lot of
True.
intriguing lines on it.
Yeah.
And this one was the one that got cut by the wayside, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Moving on, we got Jake Hadley taking on Carlos Candelario. I bet Candelario, very small, just like a half unit. To be honest, I just think this kind of spot warrants a play on Candelario. You know, I think in terms of athleticism and upside in the UFC, Hadley's is probably a bit higher. Well, is a bit higher than Candelario's. I shouldn't say probably. You know, he's a better athlete. He's probably a crisper striker. He probably has better jiu-jitsu. But it's really hard for me to unsee, you know, his last fight with Alan Nascimento. And Nascimento's a decent talent, but he's not a wrestler. And Nascimento just out wrestling him like that and top timing him the way he did was pretty concerning. And then to compound that, you had the fight prior against Mitch Raposo, who's really also not a UFC caliber opponent, quite small for the division, who was also able win the first round, get some top time before Hadley got a finish. And Candelario, you know, the one thing he's solid at, he's a solid wrestler. He's positionally sound and he scrambles pretty well. You know, we saw him scramble pretty actively with the Tsuro Taira in his last fight. I don't think Candelario's ceiling is that high just because he lacks athleticism. I don't think he's super athletic. I don't think he's super strong. But, you know, it is the kind of fight where I think Candelario can probably get takedowns here. And if he gets takedowns, I think he can probably ride out time on top. So it's like, yeah, maybe the line ends up being justified. Hadley's made improvements, better athlete, etc. But it's the kind of fight where the upside on the Candelario side is such because of the dynamic that he could be a hindsight favorite. So I think it's worth a small sprinkle here. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I went into this thing, like coming out of this, I guess I should say, thinking like Hadley, like 60-ish% is fine, 65% is fine. But like, I think Candelario can compete in the striking. Obviously, I think Hadley's a better striker, but in terms of the grappling, Candelario's solid, cardio solid. Like, again, pretty much all the points that you touched on. I think Candelario is just a solid prospect overall here. So it's like plus 200 on him against the guy who I think would just have to dominate him in the grappling to pay it off. Yeah, a small shot for me too.
Luke, how about yourself?
I personally think it's a trap by the number on Candelario. I think it's probably going to be a competitive fight in a lot of ways. So bet the plus 2. I genuinely think it's a trap by the number. And honestly, I think that Hadley's performance against Nascimento was kind of an anomaly. Personally, I just don't really think he showed up in that fight. I guess we'll see. I know it's kind of more narrative based for me because I am a Candelario truther. You know, I came very close to betting him. Well, I actually did bet him in the original booking against Taira. And then the rebooking I passed because I heard some shit through the grapevine that he was hurt. Turns out that was actually confirmed. And he said he was like 70%, you know, going into that fight. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be aggressive. He's going to throw strikes. To your point, John, he's got some wrestling upside. Scrambly dude. He's going to be tough to finish. I think Hadley's better than him, though. Personally, I do. So I'm going to stay away. I think it's trapped by the number.
I think Pepe's take on the over being good is actually pretty on point. I'd be pretty surprised if Hadley submitted him or if either guy found a KO here. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's only like minus 210, something like that. So
yeah,
Real quick, I guess I if I was to play the fight, that's how I'd probably play it. I actually might do that as well. I kind of took a very similar position against Nascimento. I played the over in that fight as well. I think both guys, you know, despite their defensive flaws, both guys are tough as shit. Both guys have really good submission defense. So probably going to be, you know, a higher action type of over, but I think that's actually the best play for the fight.
Yeah. Moving on, we got Johnny Munoz Jr. He's taking on Ludovic Sholinian. Lags, any thoughts here?
It's a weird fight because I don't really think too highly of either, to be quite frankly. You know, I think in terms of the grappling, I think Munoz does have an edge there, but it's like I don't think he has any wrestling, quite frankly. So I think it's a weird spot, to be honest with you. I think decent favorite again. Munoz is fine, but I don't think Sholinian's that UFC caliber, quite frankly.
Luke, how about you?
I'm getting very close to betting Sholinian. Not really that I want to, to be honest, because there's just not a ton of things I love with him. But the thing with Munoz is like when you look at a number like this, I don't want to make a direct comparison, but even to last week with Hooper and Garcia, a guy who's relying on having to grapple, who's not a phenomenal wrestler by any means, and he's a very sizable favorite. It's like you kind of just have to do the mental gymnastics in your head of saying, like, well, if that shit doesn't happen, what then? Because what I've seen from Johnny Munoz on the feet, it's not pretty. He doesn't throw strikes. He doesn't have power. He just folded like a lawn chair, against homeboy Gravely in his last outing. I mean, the Sholinian guy, he will go forward. Just the problem is his volume isn't always the most consistent either. But he's a tough dude and comes from a strong wrestling background. Gave Jack Shore, I wouldn't want to say troubles, but I would say like he held up better against Shore than I think most people anticipated. Like Shore only went 2 for 8 on takedowns. Sholinian showed good defensive grappling chops, was able to get out of some tricky spots in there to boot. And like I said, I don't think Munoz's volume is there. I don't think his offensive wrestling is anything special. So it's like, I guess what I would pose to you guys and other people, what happens if Johnny Munoz can't land takedowns and this turns out to be a 15-minute range kickboxing match? Are you happy about your Johnny Munoz ticket over 2-1? I sure as shit wouldn't be. Flip side of the coin too. What if Sholinian just goes out there and out wrestles him and he's positionally responsible and doesn't get subbed or swept? I think that's also possible. So at plus 200, I think it's one of those spots where the upside is just so much more in terms of covering a price in the dog, where I think one thing needs to kind of really go right for Johnny Munoz to cover his price, where I think there's other things you can talk about as to why Sholinian could make this fight closer and be valued.
Yeah, I more or less am in the same camp. I guess my one hesitancy and why I haven't played it as of yet, though I am watching the line and considering it, is like I just don't think I don't think Munoz does a lot of things at like an average UFC level, but obviously his jiu-jitsu is quite good, even for the UFC. Whereas I don't think Sholinian does really anything at like, a UFC level. I guess he's an okay wrestler. So to me, I keep thinking about it and I'm like, yeah, Sholinian could punish him on the feet if he can keep it there, but he could also conceivably just get kick volumed here. The one like I actually agree with your take of the short fight. The funny thing about that fight is on rewatch, it's like, man, if this dude just let his hands go, he probably wouldn't have outstruck Shore. But like he didn't even really give himself a chance to win the fight. He went forward all fight. He mostly held his own in the grappling, but he never really gave himself a chance. And so with that kind of guy, it's like he's not a huge hitter. He probably isn't going to try to wrestle Munoz with the jiu-jitsu thing going on there. I just don't think his upside's high. But I do agree, like Munoz doesn't have a ton of tools to cover this price. Like it's hard. Rewatching the Jamie Simmons fight is a tough watch, man. Like watching the round 1 of that fight. Like he just doesn't, if he's not clinching you up, and I'm sure he will here, but if he's not clinching you up and getting takedowns, he doesn't really offer a ton of offense either. I think if it got out to like plus 220, 230 range, I mean, I'd have to take a poke at that point. I'm thinking about it anyway. I just, because I do agree, like, what is, what could be the highest you cap Munoz here? It's hard to go past minus 200 in my opinion. So we'll see. I'm thinking about it, but I think, if you're going to bet it, Sholinian seems the clear side. Moving on, though, we got Jinyu Frey. She's taking on Viana. Luke, any thoughts here?
I think a competitively lined fight makes sense. I know Viana's taken a decent amount of, I guess, a little bit of steam, and it's moved up. I kind of disagree personally. I'm more actually on the side of picking Jinyu Frey just because I fucking hate Viana. I hate her style. To be honest, a girl who's going to sit there and just throw away fights, pull guard, has no get up game, that type of shit. Like it's been her whole career. So which is why I could never back her. In fact, I've just faded her consistently. or bet unders or some shit like that, and it's actually been a profitable back. On the flip side of the coin, Frey is kind of a weird character too, because she's been known to be, this lower volume, counter striker historically, but since moving to Forest, she actually has bumped up her volume a bit more, which I think is interesting within this matchup. I think she probably hits a bit harder than Viana, but both girls' defense isn't very good. Obviously, Viana, is primarily relying on guard subbing people to win her fights. But I don't really think Frey's going to wrestle here, given the DMOP fight, because, I mean, Demopolis, 10 planet black belt type of girl who's going to have, an aggressive guard. And I would say it's a similar dynamic in that sense if we're relating it. And Frey decided not to wrestle at all in that fight. So I don't think she's going to here, which I think limits just that general upside of Viana, unless she, pulls or Frey goes down with her. But I think it's a close striking match at the end of the day. So I don't have a strong opinion, but I actually side with the dog and Frey.
Yeah, I bet Viana at an early number, like plus 100, I think. I think the line's about right where it is now, in my opinion. I do agree with you on the wrestling aspect of it, Luke, because that's really, that's why it's only a small play for me, because that's always the concern with Viana fights is, she's so happy to be on her back. I do think this is the kind of fight, though, where, Viana has a chance to be really offensive off her back here, potentially sweep her and do work. Like, I just don't. Some of the scrambles you saw with Hansen with Frey weren't great. Ironically, I bet Frey against Hansen because I thought she could potentially wrestle her because Hansen plays guard, and she showed no interest in doing that. Showed no interest in taking down Demopolis. Even the GDP fight, I bet her in that fight, and she controlled her for 2 rounds in that fight. But round 2, she lost, and she didn't even try to get her down. She just kind of stood at distance and got volumed. And GDP was posing no threat. So it's like, I don't really think she's likely to wrestle. I do think Viana is likely to pull guard at some point. But I think Viana is pretty, I don't want to say likely to sub her, but live to win minutes off her back, which we don't really see very often. But it does happen sometimes. I do think she could sweep her. On the feet, I do kind of slightly favor Viana just because I do think her volume's more reliable. I think she hits a bit harder. And just in general, I think you have to consider the fact that Viana has a lot more finishing upside in this matchup than Frey does. And if it goes to a decision, Frey has the ride out on top and get 7-8 minutes of control and win that way upside. But she could lose that fight. Whereas I think she's a pretty considerable dog in every other realm. So, I like Viana here. Lads, what do you think?
Yeah, it was funny. I was actually laughing a lot when you were mentioning the GDP fight because that was literally the fight I was bringing up to why, it's hard to trust Frey really in any fight. Her IQ is just not there. Fight to fight, you dominate, win the first round, you handily lose the second round. Obviously, you go back to the wrestling in the third round, but, that's the thing to me. If she goes to the wrestling for 15 minutes here, it'd be an easy Frey bet for me, quite frankly. But you just really never know what game plan she's going with.
Yeah, and I just look at she only attempted 1 takedown against Yoder as well. So it's
it's the girls that she should be able to wrestle, she's choosing not to for whatever reason. So and she's making them close fights. So
agreed. Moving on.
Go for it, Luke.
Interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, honestly, it's kind of a weird spot though. If you like Viana, honestly, yes, from a minute perspective, if Frey wrestles, not good. But honestly, I think if Frey wrestles, Viana could definitely guard something.
Yeah.
I really do. I just
plus 300 is not bad for it.
I don't hate it if that's a sprinkle you want to take her. What's Viana finish only by chance?
It's got to be Big G.
I was going to look that up. I don't think I didn't think DraftKings had them out yet.
Is it on Best Fight Odds? Does not.
Oh yeah, minus 250.
Oh, you see it? Yeah. So. Which is about right. Maybe can even be wider, to be honest. Frey really can't bust a grape. She hurt Yoder briefly, once, but they were just biting down and swinging in that fight. So, moving on. Good fight here. We got Mario Batista taking on Benito Lopez. Lopez coming. I don't think he's fought since COVID, if I'm not mistaken. He's had quite the layoff, some injuries, got his realtor's license. He's doing things. He's doing things with his life, but but the things he's doing haven't been MMA so far. I bet Mario Batista here. I think I got minus 225. Would I advocate a play at minus 300? I put him a little past that, but I probably wouldn't bet him at the level he's at now. I I do think he should be fine here though. I mean Batista in theory or Lopez in theory could have leveled up, but the truth is the footage we have of Lopez, he's a guard player. He has no hands at all. He has no defense. All he's really got is leg kicks and body kicks. Like I guess he could clip Batista with. I mean, he could clip Batista with a high kick, or maybe meme out a sub. But Batista historically is pretty durable. He's going to be better everywhere. He's stronger. I think he's the much better striker. I think he's the better grappler. If he gets on top, I think he can have big success. Should have much more finishing upside here. I don't think he has too many issues. What do you think, lads?
It was funny. I was actually talking to you guys about it because I know you guys played it earlier number, and I was go back into it, looking at more tape today and whatnot. I still think there's a great play, even at the number where it's at now. Like I played it at 285. I really think for me, also on top of the fact, like the wrestling aspect, I think it's massive for Batista, but I think the cardio for him is huge. I think after like 7.5 minutes, you're going to see a big switch in the cardio dynamic. So I think this is going to be all Batista, and I actually like a play on Batista sub. I know it's like 475, 500 out there. So just kind of waiting for other books to drop that out.
Yeah, it makes sense. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I think Batista's honestly probably, out of what's a relatively lackluster card overall betting wise. I think Batista's a great spot here. I played 230. Personally, I'm kind of with you, John. I don't, know if I'd be running to the window to play him at 300. Might still be some meat on the bone there, to be honest, but to me, it just comes. I think he's better than Lopez pretty much everywhere. Where this play could potentially bust is the fact that we've seen not Lopez, Batista, get hit with some big explosive shots. We saw that jump knee from Sandhagen put him down. Yeah. Benito Lopez will throw flying knees. We obviously saw him get clocked by Trevin Jones. So, there's points in Batista fights where that defense. I mean, he went to war with Jinsu Son, he had no concern for his defense in that fight at all. Obviously, his durability held up in that spot. But my point is that's concern with Batista. Sometimes it's just the defense, necessarily isn't in the frontal cortex, for him against a guy in Lopez who is explosive, who can hurt people. Right. So that's why I didn't necessarily load up the Brinks truck, on Mr. Batista here. But minutes wise, I just think he's a much better striker. I think his pacing is more consistent. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. We've seen him go to the wrestling much more proactively, especially in the last couple of fights where it's looked good. Lopez on the ground has not looked good. And honestly, with Lopez, I think he's 3-1 in the UFC officially. He could honestly be like flip-flopped in that he could potentially maybe not have a win in the UFC. I mean, those Morales fights, I think it was either the Vince Morales fight was bullshit, and then the Albert
both were pretty close fights. Yeah.
Yeah. He could, and if you actually go back and look at MMA decisions and how the media members scored, I mean, a lot of people thought he lost. Both of those fights. I just think it's interesting from that capacity. And then you brought up the fact, the guys, on a 3-year layoff, the guy's out here selling fucking houses. Doesn't have any pics in the gym on his IG. It's I don't know, man. I don't know what from Lopez here, but
with those glasses on, when you say the guy's out here selling fucking houses, I don't know. It's killing me. It sounds so pretentious.
Should I join the Iaquinta, real estate company?
Benito Lopez did tag him in an Instagram post.
Jesus Christ.
So last thing I'll say though too. So they did drop props for this actually, and so DraftKings has sub at plus 600. So
yeah, it's not horrible. Yeah, that isn't horrible.
Count me in.
Moving on though, I can't believe we have to break this shit show down again. We got Miranda Maverick taking on China Young. Lags, any thoughts here?
So actually, I did go back and look at this, quite frankly. At first, I didn't have a passionate take on it, but I actually think Maverick should finish her, quite frankly. I have a play on the under 2.5, small for me, minus 110. I think there's levels in the ground here, quite frankly. I think Maverick can dominate on the mat.
Luke, how about you?
This one's a frustrating one, obviously, because it's a second booking. I was able to get in on Maverick as a parlay leg at like minus 400 in the first booking, and she's fucking 600 now. It's like no, 400 was about the brink, but that I could do for a chick fight personally, but she really is just better than Shanna Young everywhere. She really is. She shouldn't have much issue in this fight. But once again, I just go back to the fact it's women's MMA. We get some wonkiness, we get some bullshit. Maverick still is not a world beater by any means, and I'm definitely not the person who's like in the camp that's saying Miranda Maverick's going to be a future world champion. In fact, I've been more so on the contrarian point of that, but I do acknowledge the fact that the girl has improved. She has gotten better. We can see that since her Invicta days in multiple realms of her game. Obviously it's not only a rebooking of the original fight, but these girls fought I think 3 or 4-ish or so years ago. Maverick ran around the round. So kind of what I see here again. I know it's kind of a mark take, but 600, I think pretty much everybody's in lockstep here.
Yeah, about same here. I actually bet Maverick at minus 350 last time. Obviously, no interest in minus 675. But, I mean, directionally, unless she wants to show off her striking, she shouldn't have any issues. I mean, if she does decide to do that, I think Shanna Young could volume her potentially. But, I mean, Young's takedown defense is poor. Maverick's a good enough wrestler that she should be able to get her down and hold her down.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Maverick big fave is fine to me.
Yeah, I guess when you guys are saying like you agree as well, like big fave Maverick, do you think then like how do you feel about the total then with the under at like evens? Like I think that's a great line personally.
Yeah, I mean you're just relying. I mean the thing is you did see Young survive on the mat with Chasson, who probably is not as good as Maverick, but I think I'd almost rather, if I was trying to take that route, though, go ITD on the Young side. Like, I don't really, or not the Young side, the Maverick side. Like, I don't think. I mean, what's the difference in price there?
Yeah, so the under is minus 110, and her ITD is plus 100.
Yeah, if you can take the under, I mean, at that point, but yeah, I mean, you might be right. I mean, she can certainly finish her. I don't really disagree. I don't feel strong. I'm like so. I hate taking WMMA totals. That's just like, or WMMA unders. It just feels
that's me with women's main event unders. It's the same.
Yeah,
same shit. I'm off that train.
It like we're gonna watch Miranda Maverick. If I don't bet it, you'll cash it easily, Lags. And if I do bet it, we're gonna watch her just sit there with a body triangle and like love tap her on the head for 15 minutes in this fight. But yeah, I don't hate it. I don't think it's crazy. So moving on though, I like the Electric Man himself. We got Derek Minner taking on Sholinian Nuerdanbieke. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Luke, any hot takes here?
This is a fight I still actually need to do a little bit more tape on. But I mean, Minner's Minner. I mean, we know. Obviously we've seen some extended fights from, but I honestly I don't really care. Like I just don't. I have to look at the large body of work, the large sample. He's going to go out there. He's kitchen sink round one guy. At the same time, I also think there could be just some like overcorrection here within the line. I mean, people were talking like TJ Brown was the second coming of Christ in that fight, the last one for Nuerdanbieke. And I told P, I was like, if you lay this shit on TJ Brown, you might be in for some stuff. My point is the sentiment, right? Like the sentiment was that TJ Brown was going to just fuck this guy up. Like that was pretty much what everyone's take, or the large body of people's takes. It's like, all right, he doesn't. Nuerdanbieke wins minus 200 now in this booking. Like it's just, we see this dynamic so often, and it's just hard for me to ignore. Is he a better wrestler than Minner? I think so. But honestly, even going back and watching Minner's fight against Elkins, like he put up a lot of resistance. Actually had wrestling success of his own against Elkins. We can talk about how shot Elkins is, but it's like he's shot because he, maybe can't take a punch or his durability sucks. But it's like wrestling wise, like he actually had some early success. And this was coming from someone who had a decent sized bet on Darren Elkins in that spot. And, I was sweating my dick off through the first 5 minutes of that. I was like, oh man. Minner's going out there getting him some issues. But that's the thing with Minner. Like if you're going to bet Minner, you have to bet him, ITD. I mean, outside of the Rosa fight where, Rosa just has no takedown defense and is going to sit there and lay on his back, it's Minner ITD or bust. So honestly, that's kind of where I'm looking at is instead of really trusting a side, the under 1.5 is plus 145. I think that's just enticing, really in any Minner fight. Concern obviously Nuerdanbieke kind of wrestler, maybe he just lays on him, right? It extends there, but I don't know, man. Plus 145 and an under 1.5 in a Minner fight's always going to interest me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mildly tempted by Minner, to be honest. I actually didn't think his cardio looked horrible against Hall, to be honest. He just kept ending up in that stupid fucking position and following him into his guard. But he held it longer than he normally does. The thing is, with Minner fights, it's always just like 35% is a big number for somebody who's historically very round one or bust, It is, but at the same time, I can't really unsee Nuerdanbieke getting taken down multiple times with ease by Jean Soriano. I can't really unsee him getting taken down by TJ Brown. And the truth is, and I made this case on the podcast before he fought Rosa, guys who are easy to take down, it's easy to think that Minner, is just sub or bust in round one. And for the preponderance of his career, that's been true. But a lot of those subs were against bad fighters, and most of the guys he wasn't subbing are guys who could scramble a bit. I'm not necessarily sure Nuerdanbieke can, and I would be more concerned about the possibility of Nuerdanbieke getting on top of him and him quitting. But what if he doesn't want to go down there with Minner and wants to strike with him? I think Minner's the better striker, personally, like by a decent amount. And I mean, I think he has as much power. So, I mean, I'm considering a play on Minner. Again, it looks like this line is starting to move towards the Nuerdanbieke side a bit. Hoping to get a better number here, but like, I mean, for me, I just don't. I mean, this guy lost to Joshua Kulabau. He was plus 200 against TJ Brown. I didn't think he looked particularly great in that fight, personally. The Sean Soriano fight, he lost the first round. Soriano was doing fine in that fight till he collapsed. I mean, yeah, Derek Minner always live for a collapse, but that's why we don't bet Derek Minner as a favorite. We fade him as a favorite, but he's plus 180 here and hopefully headed to plus 200. So I'm kind of interested. Lags, what do you think?
So I guess real quick, I'll talk about the violence props, I guess. So DraftKings has the doesn't go at minus 175.
It's not bad.
I guess for me, and I guess alluding to what what Luke mentioned a little bit, I think where we're at now, like minus 200, is kind of like we're pricing in the Minner cardio collapse a little bit. Like, I don't think his work rate, like Shailan, I guess I should say, his work rate's that great. So like 2 and 3, I don't think it's really a lock for him to win. Like I guess most people might think like in Minner fights. So I think it's more of a sketchy fight. I think I'd rather target the violence, quite frankly, but it's a pass spot for me.
Yeah, and it's like Luke was just talking about Elkins. Like Elkins is a fucking dog, man. Like you do not get to fight that guy in that work. Like he was the ultimate. What I am looking to bet as an underdog against Derek Minner was Darren Elkins. Like literally in a dictionary, if you looked it up, his picture would be there in that kind of a spot. Yeah, I agree. I think Minner's a good spot here. Honestly, I really do. Probably going to take the plunge eventually here. Moving on though. Interesting fight. Mark Madsen, Grant Dawson. Lags, any thoughts here?
No strong level thoughts, I should say. Like, I think the line's a bit much where it's at right now. But I think in terms of like the physicality, the wrestling, overall striking in general, I think Dawson's a better fighter here, quite frankly. And cardio, I think, again, favors Dawson. So in general, I think it's a good spot for him. I don't see a ton of issues, but like I'm not running to the window to lay 220, 230 on Dawson here.
Luke, how about you?
It's another one of these like, ping pong in your head type of fights for me, whether I want to bet it or not. I'm actually considering playing Madsen, to be honest. It's a weird fight of like who's potentially the better wrestler. And I guess the question I would pose to you guys and people listening is like, I mean, what happens if you see the Clay Guida fight, right? Like where the wrestling cancels itself out and both guys stand and strike. Both guys are shit strikers. Both guys have poor defense. They're not good. Like neither guy is really good on the feet. And so I think you really have to price that in when you're handicapping this fight of a very real possibility, because I'm telling you right now, that's a very real possibility that we could see here. So I've seen, people sit there, heavy, big bets on Grant Dawson, parlaying Grant Dawson. It's like, how do you do that at this price? Like when that's a very real possibility. I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen. Maybe it doesn't. I'm just saying that's just a very real scenario of what could happen in this fight. It's like, and if you're getting Grant Dawson at over 2-1 in a 15-minute range kickboxing match, I would be shitting my fucking pants, right? If I was holding that ticket, right? So I just want to throw that out there. But I do agree with Grant Dawson being favored because I think the primary difference between the two, amongst anything we can see or quantifiably look at, is that he's just a better grappler. He's a better grappler than Mark Madsen. We know that. Like I said, it just goes back to my point. Like, is he going to be able to just go out there and out wrestle Mark Madsen though? I mean, no one really ever has. What I would say is, in the second round, I think at the end against Pasquale, Pasquale was actually able to get him down and kind of start riding up on his back. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So in fact, like if you're looking to play Dawson, he's like plus 375 by submission. It's like, if you think Dawson, excuse me, his value at this price tag, how do you not have something on Dawson by sub at 375? Like, because I think for him to cover that price tag, he has to have dominant positions within this fight to cover this price, which I'm not necessarily convinced he gets, right? So I think if you're playing Dawson, I would much rather buy down and take a pop on him finishing.
Yeah. So I really have no idea how this fight goes. Like, I could not have less of an opinion. Like, I feel pretty strongly that Dawson's going to wrestle hard. I mean, the guy came out against Leo Santos and wrestled hard. So I'd expect he's going to try to here. And in terms of like MMA grappling, I think Dawson's MMA grappling is more well suited to MMA than Madsen's is. But we don't really know. Like you said, Luke, the Pasquale fight had some bad looks for Madsen, but it was one instance. Like, we don't really know what fresh Madsen looks like defensive grappling wise. Like, he comes from a wrestling base. He looks like he's got pretty strong hips. If he can defend submissions well, it's very possible he can keep this standing. I just don't know. I bet Guida big. Granted, he was a dog, but I thought Guida would come out and try to push a pace, try to wrestle him, and then he didn't. I'm not really expecting that from Dawson. But I do, similarly to how I felt in the Guida fight, think, if he comes out with the same kind of approach he had against Leo Santos and whatnot, he's very likely to eventually wear out Madsen until he's exhausted and potentially finish him late in this fight. But again, I just don't, it's very possible Madsen's just got very good takedown defense and defensive grappling and keep it in space, or even get takedowns of his own. He is at Fight Ready. He's at a legit camp now, training with legit guys. So he's on all the good stuff. You can see that in his pictures. But on the other side of that, he's 36, and Dawson's like 27, training at ATT now, should be getting better at everything, every fight. I don't know. It's like I do think the line is potentially extreme just because of the potential uncertainty in this fight. But at the same time, I don't think there is a scenario where I could cap Madsen past like plus 125, to be honest, or plus 150. Whereas there are scenarios where I could cap Dawson as, I mean, I guess if you tell me Madsen's an elite defensive grappler who can keep this at range, I'd probably call it evens because Dawson does volume at range. But there are scenarios where I think Dawson's ceiling could be quite high here if it turns out he can just get him down with ease. But I'm passing. I think. I mean, look, if it blows out like crazy to like plus 250 Madsen, then yeah, I'll have a poke for the culture, and I'll probably lose it just like my bet for Anderson Silva for the culture last weekend. But I don't feel strongly about it. Lags, how about you?
I already.
Oh fuck me.
No, you're good. I start with the next one, Sherman Parisian.
No, the next one is actually Tagir Ulanbekov and Nate Maness.
I was looking at best fight odds. To be honest, I don't have a strong Tagir because I think Tagir it sucks. Quite frankly, I think he's one of the fraud Russians. Quite frankly, so like he's a guy that doesn't do a ton on the feet, isn't wrestling a ton. Obviously, that's his best part of his game, but I don't know. Like I struggle to see like laying that in this fight. I think it's a competitive fight that Tagir probably ends up edging. So yeah, pass for me.
Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I guess the main talking point, I mean, Maness is going down to 125. We're going to see how that goes. I mean, he was a decent sized bantamweight, actually. So, I mean, I don't know how this fucking guy's going to make 125. I'm just, maybe he can, and he's, got all the coaches and, S&C coaches and all that shit, but it's like, I don't know. I don't know how this fucking guy's making 125. So I have heavy concerns about, the weight cut and what that's going to potentially do to him. Once again, we're also not talking about, a drop from middleweight to welterweight. It's 135 to 125. I mean, the cuts at this low of a weight class, this is as worse as it gets, just based on pure body mass, right? Like it just is what it is. So massive concern there. I've just not been a Maness guy at all. I can talk about Tagir and say he's a technical boxer, and that's really about it. He's low volume. He doesn't wrestle. Well, he's technical. He has power, right? Obviously, but he doesn't wrestle. We've seen him severely struggle on the ground in a few spots. Like, I mean, Johnny Munoz would have finished him if there was an extra 10 seconds on the clock in the first round, of that fight. Obviously, he didn't get finished by Umar in the last context, but just got dominated. But like, I go back to his fight with like Luke Sanders. Like Luke Sanders, old shitty Luke Sanders was whooping his ass in that fight, and he gets clipped against Tony Gravely. Another scenario where there's a couple more seconds left on the clock. Tony Gravely finishes him, right? But he got saved by the bell, comes back, clips Tony Gravely. It's like there's just very real scenarios where Nate Maness doesn't even have a win in the UFC. Like there just is. But you get to Ulanbekov at the same time with what Lags is touching on in Homeboy being a kind of potentially fraudulent Russian. He's definitely on the lower of the totem pole of the Dagestani contingent for me. Like, he's hittable, doesn't check kicks. At the end of the day, though, I think his pacing is more consistent. He's more reliable to throw strikes. He's a better wrestler. He's a better grappler. It's a fight that I think he should win. Am I running to the winner to lay 2-1 on it? No, because I think he could get knocked out. Or honestly, even within the Gravely fight for Maness, his takedown defense actually looked pretty good. Like I was impressed in some capacity, in that fight. Like I thought, as someone who bet Tony Gravely, I thought Tony Gravely was going to be able to take him down without much issue. And he put up a healthy amount of resistance there. So, but yeah, Tagir. He's a guy that just fights close at the end of the day, and I don't want to put myself in a position to lay a super chalky price on a guy who's going to fight close, but I do think the primary minute upside does lie with him.
Yeah, I bet Tagir. I think the price right now is fine. I think Maness is a shit house, to be honest. I know all about the Luke Sanders fight because I was huge on Luke Sanders, and he did exactly what I thought he was going to do until he did what Luke Sanders tends to do and collapsed down the stretch in that fight. I also bet Tony Gravely against him. And, totally disagree that his first layer takedown defense is good, but like once you get to his legs, he's kind of lost. Like I rewatched that Umar fight. Like Umar was not getting like difficult takedowns. It was kind of just simple inside trips and the kind of trips that Tagir likes to go to a lot. The few times we've seen Maness on his back has been dreadful. Against Munoz, against Umar, regionally, he just really has nothing. Like once he's down on the mat. Gravely got him down briefly, but he didn't, he kind of put him down on his stomach and he was able to just stand up. I think Tagir's going to get takedowns here. I do understand the Tagir fight's close, but also like close fight with Bruno Silva. Well, turns out Bruno Silva is really good. I know he was minus 500 in that fight, but I think Bruno Silva is a lot better than we all thought Bruno Silva was going into that fight. Nascimento, pretty good prospect, beat him. Close fight with Tim Elliott, who's like a legend of the division. And then it's like Nate Maness, who to your point, literally, he could clip him. I mean, Tagir is hittable, but I'm very confident that on volume, he's going to outvolume him here. I'm very confident if he gets on top, he can hold him down. And then you think about the fact that, like, I mean, dude, like you said, he's this guy's 5'10". He was a big bantamweight. Have you seen the picture of him today that's out there? Like, he looks sucked the fuck out. This is not healthy. You see this, like, I don't think people realize like the difference from going from like 205 or from like 185 to 170, you're not losing as large a percentage of your body mass as like 135 to 125. Like that is a huge percentage. I think it's fair to say it's likely to negatively impact him here. I think Tagir is going to be fine. Like I said, maybe Maness proves to me that he has a get-up game for the first time in his career, but every time I've seen this guy put on his back, he just kind of accepts being there. Like, the guy gets taken down by Umar, and the first thing he does is close his guard. Yeah, I think 70-75% for Tagir is about right. So, hopefully it chips. More juice. It's disgusting, but anyway, we move on to an even more disgusting bet here. We got Chase Sherman. He's taking on Josh Parisian. Luke, do you have any thoughts here?
I'm definitely not going to sit there and be the guy to say, "Oh, I'm not going to, do this because it's a shit show." As someone who has a bet on Ramona Pasquale on this card, so I definitely can't take that argument. But at the same time, to me, it's just a variance low level heavyweight fight where I guess the difference in relation, at least to the Pasquale bet, I'm getting plus 135. Here we're talking about a pick 'em price. I do understand the Sherman money coming in, though. I do think Sherman is the side personally. I just, Parisian is just completely a negative athlete. He's fat. He sucks.
He's terrible.
He's just bad. Like, he was getting his ass whipped by Alan Baudot. Chase Sherman should honestly probably cleanly win the striking in this fight, as horrible as that sounds. But at the same time, why don't you bet Chase Sherman? I'm not betting Chase Sherman because I do think the wrestling and grappling upside does lie with Parisian here. I don't like what we've seen with Sherman on his back. Parisian goes to it. He said he's fat, he's out of shape, but he's a big dude. Gets on top of people. Like I said, I don't like really ever what I've seen from Sherman on his back. So if that's an approach that Parisian's going to take, and then I sit there and I lay favorite money on Sherman, you're going to find me hanging in the closet, next week. I can't do it. But like I said, I do agree with the money coming in on Sherman. I think he should win this fight.
Yeah, someone may find me hanging in the closet if Sherman loses. I did bet Sherman here. It's funny. I didn't bet him big, but C texted me yesterday, and he's like, "We got a max bet Sherman, right?" I was like, I don't know about max, but I did bet him. Look, Parisian fucking sucks, man. I get, I had the same. It's funny because before I taped it, I was kind of like, I might bet Parisian here. Sherman can't wrestle. Like, this is a good matchup. And then you look at Parisian. Dude, this guy is an awful wrestler. Like, an absolutely abysmal wrestler. Like, he doesn't even really change levels. He just kind of bends over. He wasn't getting Baudot down early in that fight. He went 1 for 8 on takedowns against Roque Martinez. He just kind of tends to get on top of people as fighters get exhausted. The thing is, he doesn't have good cardio himself. He has terrible cardio. The guy gasses out 6 to 7 minutes into every single fight. And like, I look at Sherman, it's like, yeah, he has a history of bad stuff happening on the ground. but it actually looks like he's making at least some improvements. And he did pop up twice against Alexander Romanov. And this is the kind of fight where I don't think Sherman needs technical get-ups. The whole Derek Lewis just stand up thing is going to work just fine against Josh Parisian, you know? And at range, Josh Parisian is like maybe the worst striker on the entire roster, male or female. Like he is truly horrendous. He has no defense. He has no power on his shots. Like Sherman is going to pick this guy apart on the feet. I think very high probability he finishes him here, to be honest. I get it. And maybe, I mean, look, I laid minus 190 on Sherman, minus 180 on Sherman against Porter. I have to bet him here. Like this is just like, this is obscene. Or not obscene, but I mean, look at the losses Chase Sherman has. All of these guys would be big faves to Josh Parisian. Josh Parisian got out-grappled by Dantele Mays for 15 minutes. I think Sherman should be minus 150. I think he should win this fight. He's the more skilled striker by a lot. He has better gas, ironically, for once in his career. And I don't really think takedowns are going to come easy for Parisian. What do you think, Lags?
Yeah, I almost clicked Sherman at minus 110 myself, thinking pretty much kind of the same thing, thinking, maybe there's slight grappling upside for Parisian, but it's like his cardio is way worse. I think his defense, even though both these guys don't have good defense, I think his defense is much worse. It's like, I think it's a good spot for Sherman, but again, I'm not looking to lay minus 130, 35 on Sherman. I think it's a close.
I hope Sherman kills him. Moving on,
he
should. Neil Magny taking on Daniel Rodriguez, rebooked from a couple weeks ago. I don't have a strong opinion here. It's a cool fight. Though, I was tempted to take the dog shot on Rodriguez. The one thing that's kind of holding me back is just like, I discussed this when Rodriguez-Holland was supposed to be the fight before Rodriguez's last fight. I don't really like that Rodriguez is so reliant on jab and pocket boxing. Like, I do think he can get inside-outed pretty easily by someone crafty. And I think Magny has the tools to do that, Though, sticks in my head is the Jeff Neal fight where, Magny did that pretty effectively. And I would rate Jeff Neal quite a bit higher than Daniel Rodriguez. I think Magny's got some takedown equity here. I think as long as he can avoid big, heavy pocket exchanges, it makes sense for him to be a favorite. But at the same time, and the reason I initially was kind of interested in Rodriguez, Magny's old, man. Like he did not, I know it was grappling and yada, yada, yada. He looked like an old man against Shavkat. It really, maybe I'm putting too much stock into him losing as a plus 360, but I really just did not like the optics of that fight. I didn't like how he was reacting to stuff. I didn't like his reaction of being on the ground, was throwing up heel hooks. There's a lot of reasons to like Magny here, and 3 years ago I'd have bet him here, but I think he is a fighter that's very likely declining, and it's just not something I'm trying to stand in front of. Lags, what do you think?
It's funny to talk about the Shavkat fight. We can even talk about the Max Griffin fight. I had a pretty decent bet on him by decision at like even money, and I was sweating that. I thought it was going to be fairly easy work. Griffin's the guy that slows down. Magny's the guy that turns it up. But yeah, made that a lot sweatier than I guess needed to be. And I guess coming into this spot, yeah, I liked D-Rod quite frankly. But what's keeping me off is so they were originally booked 2 weeks ago, and D-Rod pulled out of that due to a MRSA infection. It was kind of some extra symptoms, I guess I should say, lingering from that. So for me, it's just a stay away. Easy for me to pass on that.
Luke, how about you?
I'm still on the fence about it. I might play D-Rod. Sorry, guys.
Say Luke's got MRSA now.
Yeah, I'm still riding the struggle bus here, boys.
Do you have COVID?
Maybe. I guess.
I feel like Vegas is like a cesspool of COVID, at all times. I got it right after I got back from Vegas last year. It is.
I've already had it twice, unfortunately, but hopefully I don't have it again. Anyway, it's a weird fight, right? Because Magny is a guy that's just really tough to beat. Jesus Christ. Over 15 minutes, right? Usually if you're beating Neil Magny, you're finishing Neil Magny, right? He just kind of has this way to sit there, point, fight. He's kind of got some chook weaselness kind of with him. He's kind of a difficult, frustrating guy that kind of got to fight. But looking at this fight, handicapping it, and what I think is really interesting here is that when has Neil Magny faced the kind of volume that Daniel Rodriguez is going to throw at him, though. Like, I mean, in certain spots he has, but like, I just think D-Rod's volume is just completely different. His pressure is completely different. So it's like, is Neil Magny just going to be able to sit there and stay on his bike and poke at him for 15 minutes, keep him at bay when he might be losing optically as well? Maybe he can, clinch D-Rod up and do some shit there. But I don't know, man. Like, I think D-Rod's going to give him a pretty honest scrap. Like I said, though, it's just kind of tough for me to, at least at this price, to be like, yes, I'm betting D-Rod against, a guy in Magny who's just really tough to beat over 15 minutes. But I do think the finish upside actually does lie with Rodriguez. We saw Magny get clocked, in the first round by Matt Griffin. Said not a spring chicken. I am worst 45 minutes I ever spent in my life. Fucking terrible. But yeah, I think D-Rod's the side, but it's just one of those fights where I don't want to sit there and be the plant the flag guy and act like I have some strong opinion on it, because I don't. You're not getting a big plus number next to either guy's name. It just seems like one of those fights where people are going to try to sound like geniuses on, but it's like I don't really know how you can have a strong take on this fight personally.
It is a cool fight though, so I'm excited for it. One of the few fights on this card that I am. Moving on, main event though, Marina Rodriguez taking on Amanda Lemos. Rodriguez currently minus 221, Lemos plus 186. I mean, I guess the number's right. You couldn't catch me dead late. Like, I'm of the two minds with Marina Rodriguez's grappling. On the one hand, I think she's a decent submission grappler, defensive submission grappler. She doesn't really allow many passes ever, even against Carla and Hebas both on top of her, and neither were really able to pass her guard. On the other hand, she has no get-up game whatsoever. We saw her hold down and dominated by Brenda Marcos and held down for a full round by Michelle Watterson. So now she's got Amanda Lemos, who I think theoretically, Lemos I think is a black belt. Theoretically, I think Lemos could have some early success here grappling. Lemos also packs some power, but Lemos is not Carla as far as she's very reliable to gas out if she has to grapple aggressively in this fight. I do think on the feet, despite the fact that Lemos packs power, Marina is just a much better striker, much better distance management, doesn't find herself in the pocket that often, much better volume, much better cardio. Like, the dynamic of the matchup to me is one where I would bet Lemos, I think, if I was going to bet aside, just because she does have the grappling upside. She likely has at least some knockout equity and maybe some submission equity. But at the same time, I think Marina minus 220 is about right. I don't think it's very likely at all she gets subbed. I do think she's going to pick her apart on the feet. Marina late potentially in play here. The big question is just how does Lemos grapple aggressively? If so, how effectively? And if very effectively, how long can she do that without death gassing? And since all three of those boxes need to be checked to make you confident in Lemos here, I'm pretty happy to pass it. I think minus 220 is fine. I think the line's about right. Marina might struggle early. Maybe we get a good live entry on her after a round or two, but I do think she should take over down the stretch. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room here is really the cardio. So I think it's really tough to have a strong stance if you're on the Lemos side because of the unknown, really. But I'm more on the other side, actually. I do think the line's fine, and I think if you were going to play it, I would play it the prop, actually, the DraftKings has. So they have Marina and the over 2.5 rounds is minus 125. So I'd be more interested in that. I know FanDuel has 4-5 decision at plus 110. I'd be more interested.
So that's
in those
basically
kind of
just not a front kick KO, pretty much in the first.
Right. Yeah.
That's not terrible. Luke, what do you think?
Is there a line on what the 4-5 decision is?
Yeah. So FanDuel's got plus 110.
I honestly, if I was to play the fight, that's how I would play it personally. I think the 4-5 decision is a decent price. Honestly, this fight just I won't want to say a complete microcosm, but like it's very similar to what we saw a few weeks back with Bibi and Grasso. Like the dynamic is just very, very similar. But there is a few differences in where obviously I laid a decent number on Grasso in that fight, and I'm not running the winner to play Rodriguez for a couple reasons. The first being that, well, one, the price is different. I got Grasso at 185, not 220, where Emrad's at right now. And the second being that I think Lemos is just much more dangerous to Rodriguez than Araujo was to Grasso, if that makes sense, from a power component, from a submission component. She's just more dangerous. And I just can't ignore the fact that Marina Rodriguez also, like we talk about, like obviously the cardio dynamic is very real, right? Like, Lemos is probably going to gas, if this fight extends. I think we all feel pretty decent about saying that. But at the same time, I don't think I haven't heard a lot of other people talking about the fact that Marina Rodriguez has been 10-8'd 3 times in the UFC. So is the decision like as much of a lock as people are saying? Because let's say that Lemos 10-8s her, in a round. She needs to just win one more round. And we're looking at a draw.
Or even alternatively, if you had like Lemos kind of just catch a kick and take her down in round 4 and just kind of blanket her.
Yeah. And because to your point, John, I mean, I love Marina. I'm a huge Marina stan. I love the girl. She's immensely talented, but it's like you said, just the get up game. It's just not good. I mean, I would say like 95% of the time, if she gets taken down, that is a round. Like that has just been her career in the UFC. And so like to lay, we're talking upwards of, almost 70% on that. It's just like like I said, especially factoring in the fact that there's 10-8 potential here, there's more danger in Lemos's game. Like I'm not really running to the window to play it. So, if I, like I said, if I was to do anything, I'd be looking to that 4-5 decision, looking for a way to chop that price down. But from like an official, like, how I'm looking at it, I think a live bet is just much better. Because I think you might also chop Marina's price, 7.5 minutes in.
What about something? I was curious what you think of this. I was thinking about it. I don't know if I'll do it, but like
the over?
No. Marina's sub plus 1,000 is kind of like intriguing to me. Because I do kind of think, as Lemos slows, she's probably gonna have to grapple fairly aggressively. And like Marina is active from guard. It's not like she's not. Would it be shocking if I get a gassed out Lemos gets triangled here? Just put it out there. I know she has 1 sub on her record.
I'll give you some more if you want to go a little spicy like that, Sean. So let's see. So they have Marina by sub in rounds 3, 4, or 5, and that's 29-1.
I'm gonna put big $50 on it. That's worth the sprinkle.
For the culture.
Yeah, for the culture. That'll be fun. That's a nice Lambo play. I'll throw it to Narco for this week. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. We got a way better card next week. We'll have some fun with that. This one, we got Luke sick. Lags and I are just bemoaning the fact that he had to tape Ramon Pasquale, and then I have to go and tape Ramon Pasquale. Next week, though, we got an electric card. We got the return of the Cookie Monster. We got Dan Hooker. Exciting stuff. So we'll have some fun with that. We'll see what we can do. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope our bets cash. I hope your bets cash. Follow or fade us, doesn't matter. Guys, drop a like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. As usual, we got me, John, at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags, and Luke at SWR_betting. And we'll see you guys same time next week. Take it easy, everybody.
Go Phillies.
Go Phillies.